Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and thank you for joining me. As always, really excited to be joined across the way, Mr. Jeff Abercrombie, back in the saddle with me. Jeff, welcome back. Since we last did this together, you went on your little sports weekend. You got to see that ND Ohio State game. I know it's 2 weeks since that game happened, but welcome back. Share some thoughts on one of the best college football games of the first half of the college football season so far.
I mean, yeah, first of all, that game was instant classic. Second of all, I didn't have any stake in the game, but I was there with Notre Dame fans. I got my tickets thanks to Notre Dame fans, so I was rooting for Notre Dame, and it was just, yeah, I mean, it was such an instant classic. I loved I loved the game regardless, but wish it was Notre Dame coming out on top. But man, that environment. I've grown up in California, and we have Stanford, we have Cal, like we have USC down there and everything too. But California, like we don't know how to do tailgating. We don't know that type of environment. And yeah, man, that was a spectacle. That was something else. Just the tailgating before the game, just the sea of people, the way that stadium was just rocking. The energy in that stadium. Everybody was super friendly too. We had some Ohio State fans in our crowd. We had some good banter. Yeah, I was looking for, Marvin Harrison Jr., who was pretty much locked down that game. Notre Dame's got a really good, I think, an underclassman corner. He might be draft eligible. I think he might be next year though. Locking down Marvin Harrison Jr., looking at Sam Hartman be just the game, like a quintessential game manager, right? That's what really stood out to me that game. And so watching Notre Dame the next couple of weeks and seeing him kind of take a step back from that, was a little bit disappointing because I think that was a step forward. Notre Dame played better, and Ohio State came out with the win, and that's sometimes how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough once to be out there to South Bend and take in the whole experience, like the lighting of the candles everywhere, watching the players, from when they come out, they go, walk to the stadium, the whole thing. It's kind of a pretty surreal, for a sports fan, pretty surreal. One of those things that's like should be on people's bucket list to watch a game in Notre Dame and take it all in. So excited you got to take part of that. Unfortunately, the outcome of that at the end, it was something that, it kind of set the wheels in motion. If that game would have went a different way, we might have been talking about Notre Dame a little bit differently. Maybe that kind of set the wheels in motion here.
Not after this weekend though.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah, if they won that game, though, who knows the momentum that could have had moving forward. They, that was a little bit of, a hurt, to the, their playoff hopes. And then, this past week was the final dagger. But yeah, excited that you got to take part in that. It was pretty cool. I know I was looking forward to having you back on just to kind of share some quick thoughts on taking in that game and the experience and the whole thing that it was. College football, 6 weeks now in the book. NFL season, NFL week 5, wrapping up, Sunday night football here. Your 49ers are really taking it to the Dallas Cowboys as we're recording this. But let's jump right into the NFL draft report for this week. And as always, we've been doing the NFL draft report with the S2S teams of the week. So let's get right into it. Our first string team of the week at the quarterback position, a name from the past, DJ Uiagalelei out of Oregon State, helped that Oregon State again with another impressive win. They beat Cal 52-40 this week. He threw for 275 yards and 5 touchdowns. Our first string running back of the week was Trey Benson out of Florida State. He helped the Seminoles defeat Virginia Tech 39-17. He had 11 carries for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. First string wide receiver of the week, another blast from the past, Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. Alabama beat Texas A&M 26-20. Burton had 9 catches, 197 yards, 2 touchdowns. That was like the game we've been waiting for since he transferred there. And then at the tight end position, this is becoming a routine now, and it's hard to take him off this. First string tight end of the week, Brock Bowers of Georgia. They manhandled Kentucky, who was number 20th in the nation, 51-13. Bowers, 7 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown. Jeff, I know a couple of guys in here are guys that you think highly of, or once upon a time we all thought highly of Jermaine Burton. So maybe some thoughts on Burton's performance, Trey Benson's performance, to kick this off.
Well, I mean, these are the traits when they come together, you get performances like this. I mean, even DJ Uyunglele, right? The type of we've seen the skills flash before, right? We loved these players for a reason. When they were names we were talking about and highlighting, the college football landscape, years ago, and then they've been quiet. And so I think the biggest question is this them announcing their arrival? I mean, I know DJ's been doing some pretty good work up in Oregon State there. It's the Pac, it's the West Coast. So people's, he's trucking away out here in no man's land, without a bunch of eyeballs on him in prime time. But so he's actually been putting together a pretty good season. I don't know if that's going to be enough to really crack into significant draft capital, but I still think there's a window of opportunity for Jermaine Burton if he's able to really take a step forward. I think we'll get to his battery mate once we get into the Devy, the Devy slant. But Alabama hadn't looked like themselves this year, and part of that is they haven't had someone at wide receiver, really step up and take the mantle. And so if Burton can do that this year, if Burton and Milroe can really develop that chemistry, take that step together at the next level, and bring Bama back to an offense that just looks more familiar, right? It's shocking how discombobulated they look at times, and then to be able to kind of see fireworks happen. I think this could really take Jermaine Burton back into top 100 draft capital if we're start seeing those skills. We've talked about it, right? You have those traits, you have those skills. We've talked about it with some of the quarterbacks. Sometimes you just need it to click, and once it does, you're off like a rocket. And so that's going to be my question.
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. And, I remember when he first transferred there, like the expectations were really high. And new spot, we see some people come in and immediately hit the ground running. But Burton was still a very young, inexperienced player. Like, it wasn't like Jordan Addison going from Pittsburgh, where he had like 100 catch season and was the focal point of the offense, going to USC and playing, with Caleb Williams. It was a very different dynamic. Jermaine Burton was a guy who had, like, I think his best year at Georgia was like 27 catches or something, right? And it was just all about like potential. And then last year he didn't live up to that potential immediately. And in Alabama's pass offense just hasn't been what it's been, prior to this year and last year. It's just not where it was, where we expected when they were churning out all those elite wide receivers. And they had Tua, and then they had Mac, and like the pass game was seamless. Like, and they were just they were playing arcade, putting up arcade style numbers. That wasn't the case over the last 2 years. And now we're starting to see, like, is this the game as his quarterback is developing this year? Is this the Burton we might see? Does he take the mantle as the lead guy there? Because I do think if that's the case, we could see a guy who maybe was looked at more as like a late day Bree type talent right now in the year started. And can he start climbing his way back? We know he has the Alabama now pedigree. We know he was a former, I think it was 4-star or 5-star recruit. Like, so we're talking about a guy who had that, like, who showed glimpses, who last year was, before the season started, some people had him as like a 1-2 on their draft boards in terms of potential. So is this the thing that starts to move him up there? I think it's going to be fun to kind of watch. Trey Benson, I know is a favorite of both of ours. And I was on here I think it was last week. And I was like, listen, he hasn't really shown out much. We've seen some glimpses, some runs that was like, there's the guy that we were looking for. But I think the bigger picture is, I think the running back position as a whole in terms of college football this year, in terms of the draft eligible guys, has been very ho-hum. Like, we've had some nice performances from, Blake Corum. We've had a nice performance by Braylon Allen, like, and things like that. But we haven't had like the major running statistical performances that we sometimes see from the big time runners in college football. We just haven't seen it. So we get a game like this, and I know, Florida State was supposed to, beat up on Virginia Tech, and they did. And Benson's performance again shows why he's one of the top running backs. And I think there's a lot. It's very early in the race there in terms of who's the number one, the number two, number three. I don't think we're going to have much clarity on that until, right around draft weekend, because I could see a bunch of people in the mix depending on what they want. But Benson, what we always like about Benson, that contact balance, the footwork, like, he's got really quick feet for a bigger guy, like the play strength and power to toughness, a runner capable of hitting a big play, even, as not like a smaller, shiftier guy, but a guy that, wins with power, but also good vision and like I said, quick feet for a guy that size. So it was nice to kind of see him put that. You mentioned Ulangale. He's one of those guys that we said it, I think, at times last year, like, he needed a clean start, a fresh slate, and that's what he's getting here. And yeah, maybe he's not drawing the attention because it's Oregon State, but I think scouts, I'm sure, are paying attention. This is still a guy that has the size, the frame, the prototype, has the arm talent. We wanted to see consistency. We wanted to see growth and development as a natural passer. So he's starting now to stack up good performance games after good performance games. And I think he's going to now be on the mix. Like, he's now back to being, I think, a draftable player for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a lot of questions how he went sideways in Clemson, if he was ever going to get back to that. And now I think there's definitely some intrigue about him. When he was at his absolute best, that one stretch with Clemson, we thought he was going to maybe eventually become a star. Like, there were so many glimpses to me of what I thought Dak Prescott was in college. Just the size, the frame, the arm talent, tough to take down, can fight off defenders in the pocket, can run, but not going to be like that really fast runner, but more of a guy like who would be more of a red zone type runner. I think some of those traits are still there. And now if he can start putting the consistency together, and if this, new start for him, I think it's kind of fun to kind of see him doing this year. And it's kind of nice to see. Jeff, I've talked a lot about it.
Let me just take us on a quick detour. Before we get into the second string, one of the, I think, blind spots of the way that we're doing this podcast now, where we're doing teams of the week, is, we don't really get to talk about stock down much. We do a little bit when it gets to the NFL side, but not as much on the college side. And you mentioned the running backs in general. Like, this was a blow up game from Benson. We don't see much. I think Corum's really consistently made a mark. I think if we're looking at running backs, I think Corum's, because he was my running back 3 last year and he's just picked up where he left off, I think he headlines, the group with, I think, Benson, and I still think Braylon Allen is just kind of a safe bet based on his, size and production. But after that, like, where is Raheem Sanders, right? Like, I know he got hurt for a little bit there, but he hasn't even looked good outside of that. I know there were off-season, reports of him bulking up a little bit. I keep checking in on those Arkansas games just to see if there's anything to see there, and it just hasn't looked good.
Yeah, like I said, the running back group, we might get to a point where I don't even know if there's a guy who gets selected in the top 50. And I wouldn't be surprised with that, because usually to get selected in the top 50 as a running back, you got to have some special traits. I'm not sure. It's a strong class in a lot of other areas. Quarterback, offensive line is supposed to be really good. I think the wide receiver group is going to be really strong. So it's like, okay, like, you have these other positions that are really strong. I don't know if anybody's standing out. And like, you go up and down the rosters in the NFL, are there a lot of teams looking to make an investment in the early second round? I don't even think there's a real consideration right now in round 1. So you start to think, okay, is there a couple guys that could be in the mix early round 2? And I'm not even sure. I think it might be more later round 2, and round 3 might end up being the sweet spot for running backs in this class. Unlike last year where we had Bijan and Gibbs, go really high. And we'll talk about it again later. Devin A-Chain, a guy who I thought should have been an early second, fall all the way to the third round. And, it's going to be interesting to kind of see where this running back landscape takes, because it just seems to be very quiet. There doesn't seem to be a running back rising up the ranks out of nowhere. But if anything, it's kind of like what you were saying. It's kind of been going the other way, almost like a stock down for almost the whole running back position in general. And then most of the individual ones. Donovan Edwards hasn't had the year we expected. Raheem Sanders hasn't had the year we expected. This was Benson's first really great game this year. Braylon Allen's been good, but I don't think it's been like earth shattering. Like, we expect him with that Wisconsin run game and that O-line to be great. That hasn't really materialized yet. So I think we're kind of waiting here, and right now, nobody has kind of emerged that it's been a surprise. And then on the flip side, I think it's been more guys who haven't lived up to expectations so far at the running back position. And I think all the other positions probably been the other way, guys rising up, but the running back position kind of struggling and going back a little bit. So interesting that you brought that up. And I think you're right. It is one of those things where sometimes we don't get a chance to talk about stock down. But I think the running back position as a whole is an area where it's worth discussing there for sure. So let me take this to the second string team of the week at the quarterback position. He's becoming a regular on here. That's Jaden Daniels out of LSU. They beat Missouri 49-39. He had 130 yards rushing and a touchdown, but then another 253 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels continues to, LSU has turned into a potent, high octane offense. And it was a little over a year ago, we were talking about their anemic offense, the first game of the season against Florida State last year. And, and we were talking about Kayshon Boutte and all that stuff. And now, like a year later, they don't play any defense, but now they put up pinball arcade style, offensive points. And a lot of that is attributed to they have really talented wide receivers. But Jaden Daniels has really emerged as a legitimate passer on top of his athletic ability to be a dual threat capabilities. Second string running back of the week, Carson Steele, formerly of Ball State, transferred to UCLA, took Zach Charbonnet's, filled Zach Charbonnet's role this past week. They beat Washington State 25-17. He had 30 carries for 140 yards. Second string wide receiver of the week, Malachi Corley out of Western Michigan. They beat Louisiana Tech 35-28. He had 8 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's my favorite senior wide receiver. And at the tight end position, this is another week that he's on this list. Eric All out of Iowa. Iowa beat Purdue. He had 5 catches, 97 yards, and 1 touchdown. The former Michigan tight end, who last year was highly regarded going into last season, and then kind of got hurt and then lost his relevance to Luke Schoonmaker. Transfers to Iowa there, was supposed to, kind of play alongside or behind Luke Lachey. And now Eric All really emerging there to be the guy that last year some people thought was a round 3, round 4 type tight end prospect. And Iowa continues to have tight ends there that produce. Jeff, any thoughts on the emergence of Jaden Daniels or either?
Yeah, that's the big one right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'll issue an apology. I think I owe Jaden Daniels a little bit of an apology for saying Kayshon Boutte had a Jaden Daniels problem, because maybe it really was the other way around. What looked like at this point last year was Jaden Daniels bailing out of the pocket too soon, not trusting reads or the play structure, trying to just make everything happen on his own, just missing Boutte like by miles. But I don't know, maybe Boutte wasn't running the right routes. He clearly is not the player that I think we thought we were looking at a year ago. And I think Jaden Daniels is more of a player than we were looking at a year ago. And I think that's mostly a testament to the growth that he's made over that time, right? He wasn't playing this good last year. And he's really shouldering. The offense is good in LSU, not because Malik Neighbors is a superstar, which he is, but because Jaden Daniels is running the offense exceptionally well. He's just found the right blend of his athleticism and playing quarterback through the traditional passing structure too, right? I mean, 130 rushing yards is amazing. But he's doing it with his arm now as well. He's not just this athlete. And to me, I'm seeing this Jalen Hurts style path for him. He's going to be extremely interesting to see who's going to give him a shot, who's going to put him in the quarterback room, and just what could that look like in 2 or 3 years, right? Like Jalen Hurts got drafted behind Carson Wentz, almost former MVP, had he not got hurt, and ran himself out of town. Now we're graced with the superstar that Jalen Hurts is. I think it'll be really fascinating to see just how far can Jaden Daniels push this, right? Like, can he push himself all the way to the back of round one? I'm not sure, but I know he's going to be making a few waves, in a quarterback room for some NFL team.
Yeah, I think you kind of said it best there. For earlier in his career, Jaden Daniels was an athlete playing quarterback that once in a while would show a impressive trait passing wise. And now it's more he's a quarterback who also is a good athlete. And I think that's the difference. That's how far his passing and development has came, since he started out his career at Arizona State and then obviously transferred to LSU last year. And I think now at his time at LSU, we've really see him morph into a more of a complete quarterback. And listen, maybe he's not in the mix to be QB3, but I think he's now squarely in the mix to be in day 2. And that is a dramatic improvement from like we talked about last year when we first started talking about him, he was probably looked at as like a late round or UDFA type quarterback prospect. And now he's materialized into a guy who I think is a legitimate day 2 prospect. And who knows, like you said, like teams could look at him, and if they still continue to think that there's a trajectory upward in terms of his upside and ceiling as a passer, and you combine that with his athleticism and movement capabilities, who's to say he can't continue to climb up draft boards as well? Some other guys there of intrigue, I kind of mentioned Eric All. Carson Seal's an interesting one because he's a really good athlete, even though he's a really big guy. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. First 2 years of college, he played at Ball State. And then he takes over that Zach Charbonnet role. And, I kind of been waiting for him to have a big game here. And he carried a heavy workload for UCLA this week to pull off the win over Washington State. Malachi Corley, he's going to be an interesting one because, he's 5'11", but he's like 210, 215. So like, he's a guy like who's bouncing off people. You're going to hear the name. And I don't, I love Debo coming out and I don't want to compare anybody to Debo, but you're going to hear that name. It's just going to be out there just based on the body type alone and the ability to like get him the ball in a lot of different ways, screens, bubble passes, touch passes, end around, jet sweeps, all that stuff. Like he is the Western Kentucky offense and other teams know it. And he's still producing like this last week, 8 catches, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he'll be the best wide receiver down at Mobile. So he's a guy that I just don't think coming from Western Kentucky is getting a lot of, Twitter buzz and national buzz. But I think he's going to be a guy who's going to find his way into day 2 somewhere, probably on round 3, as one of the maybe the first senior wide receiver taken. I think is definitely in play for Malachi Corley. Jeff, any final thoughts there before maybe a couple honorable mention names before we take it over to the Devy team of the week?
No, let's save some time for these honorable mentions. I think they deserve it. I'll go ahead and
Sure.
pull them off here. Drake May, we've heard his name on this list before. I mean, he had an incredible game. It was against Syracuse, but 442 yards, 3 touchdowns, and looking good doing it, right? Really layered passes over the middle, bringing out some trademark arm talent that we've seen before from him. I mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. in my intro. They beat Maryland, but 8 for 163 and 1. He's a superstar, and he will be as soon as he hits the NFL field. A new name here, Jamari Thrash out of Louisville, right? Again, teased Notre Dame. Louisville beat Notre Dame this past weekend, 33-20. And, Jamari Thrash had 8 for 75 and a touchdown. And I think on the year now, he's up over 500 yards, 6 touchdowns. So he's really putting together a great season for Louisville. Louisville's entered the conversation at the ranks this past weekend and proved they belonged, taking it to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think, Brash is an interesting one because he was on my watch list in the summer. And what we've seen now, Louisville, first off, much better team than I think we anticipated. This is a statement win than beating Notre Dame. And he's now a guy who's really emerging here as a guy who was garnering no attention before the season started. And now he's a hot name in terms of the wide receivers. I was listening to, the I'm trying to blank on the name, Connor Rogers and Trevor Sigma and their draft podcast. And he was a name that they brought up last week as well as a guy who's really emerging. And then he comes out this week and a big game against Notre Dame. And then, you look at his seasonal statistics, 30 catches, right, 519 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like that's an impressive, opening, handful, 5-6 games here for Brash. And that Louisville team better than we expected. Big win, like we just talked about. So I think he's a name to really keep on our radar as the season progresses. That Brash is an interesting guy who's going to kind of throw himself into the mix. The wide receiver, rankings are going to be really intriguing because I think, while we've had a lot of questions at the running back position, it's going to be another really, really strong group at the wide receiver position. And it's fun to kind of get some new names in the mix here. First time we're talking about Corley on a season show, and then first time we're talking about Brash at all. Not even a name really mentioned, in the preseason as well either. So let me take this over to the Devy slant for this week. And again, 3 names that we're going to bring up here, for our Devy team of the week. First one is Jalen Milroe. Again, he's been the quarterback now consecutive weeks out of Alabama, beat Texas A&M. He was 21 of 33, 321 yards and 3 touchdowns, continuing that growth and development. The performance by Burden, aided that this past week. We're seeing him morph into the quarterback prospect that I think Alabama wants and needs him to be. Tat McMillan out of Arizona. Arizona lost a heartbreaker to USC 43-41. He had 6 catches, 138 yards. And I can't stop putting him on the list because Luther Burden every single week. They lost that high-scoring game to LSU, but he had another 11 catches, 149 yards. Like we're seeing Tet McMillan, Luther Burden just week in and week out put up these statistical performances that even when so many of these guys go to the NFL and get drafted, the wide receiver, ranks are still absolutely loaded with high-end elite type talents to just emerge as the next class of guys. And McMillan and Burden are for sure going to be 2 guys that when we do our summer shows next year, we're talking about right near the top of, 2025 wide receiver ranks. That's how special these 2 are. Jeff, any thoughts on, the growth and development we've seen from Milroe or, the pure excellence from McMillan and Burden?
Yeah, well, Burden as a true freshman, was getting by on some, athleticism, just I'm better than you, but he's very quickly became a much more well-rounded player. And, again, we've talked about how wonderful Marvin Harrison Jr. is, but I think Luther Burden is just kind of, ready to headline, the class the next year. But Jalen Milroe, I think, is a fascinating story because I think he got benched after week 1 or 2, and we saw Alabama just wasn't playing their best. I think Milroe just had 1 or 2 real boneheaded interceptions. Right, he threw it like right to the linebacker coming in to pick off the slot screen or something like that. But other than that, I actually thought he played really well. I thought he was making good decisions. I thought he was, playing quarterback within the pocket really well. I thought he was reading the field really well. And so I'm really glad that he's made his way back to the starting lineup. Is really, again, we said it, like maybe piloting Bama back to a bit of a semblance of what we've seen, when they were putting together undefeated seasons and just the benchmark of elite competition. They're not there yet, but Milroe is a player that I think could take them there. And again, this isn't the first step. This is just another step in that progression.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like, we saw how much he struggled early in the year. We got benched at one game and then didn't start the next game, and now we're seeing him fight back, win that quarterback position handedly. And we're starting to see the player who I think Alabama expects him to be. And it's kind of fun to kind of see him morphing into this player who is going to be maybe the guy who kind of takes Alabama back to having that type of offense that they were having. And we're starting to see glimpses of it week in and week out, him become more comfortable, winning from the pocket, making plays off structure, and another impressive performance there.
Well,
They look
yeah,
like
and
they
again,
might be
just
in
to
trouble.
interject, like, he losing your starting job is a tremendous ego blow for any quarterback, right? Like, we see, what that's done to Zach Wilson at times, and we see like it is not an easy thing to come back from, and just to go ahead and just absolutely like take that job right back. I didn't think he was playing bad enough to just get benched. He made a couple bad mistakes, but like, that's you expect that from, from someone just, picking up the position, but um a real credit to, I think, the tenacity and just the makeup of Jalen Milrow to just say, just say, no, that's my job, and just take it right back. I think there's, you don't often get a chance to, especially us, like we don't get to interview these, these athletes. We don't get to talk to them at all. And so you have to look at stuff like this to really read into kind of the makeup of a player, and it's just, to me, it's a huge testament.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's gonna be fun to kind of watch him the rest of the year. Obviously, Alabama will have some big games as the season progresses for sure. Let's spin this to the NFL side of things. Week 5 in the books for the most part, besides Monday Night Football left to be played. So let's go
That
right to
game's
the
over, by the way.
yeah, I just saw the finale. Yeah, so let's go to the NFL rookie report for this week. Unfortunately, Anthony Richardson suffered a shoulder injury. It did not look good. The X-rays were negative, but I expect him to be out for a little time. That looked like a dislocation. He was his shoulder was just kind of dangling when he went off the field. He can't seem to stay on the football field. When he is, he's fantastic. But early, the way he plays, the reckless abandon, he opens himself up for a lot of hits. He's very big and powerful and strong. But right now, the early going, he's having a hard time getting through a game without suffering an injury. At the running back position, Devin Achane just keeps doing it. I mentioned it last week. The Giants were going to have no answers for that Miami offense and slowing down their speed, and that played out, as I expected. 11 carries, 151 yards, and a touchdown. Tyjae Spears emerging, 11 touches this week total, about 70 yards and a touchdown. So he's a guy who continues to see a lot of work for Tennessee in that backfield alongside Derrick Henry. And then Jaleel McLaughlin got a big bump up and roll this week with Javonte Williams out. He had 9 carries for 68 yards and then 3 catches, 21 yards and a touchdown. The undrafted, little speedster really looks like Sean Payton may have found himself like his new version of Darren Sproles is what they've been saying. But like McLaughlin was impressive today when he's gotten touches this year, has looked good. Wide receiver Josh Downs, 6 catches, 97 yards. He's just emerging, and this is not a surprise for me. Like, I was on record of saying like I didn't think there was a 2-round disparity between Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers to Josh Downs, and right now Josh Downs is again. The difference might be that he's more limited to the slot. Well, those guys can play outside, and maybe it's as simple as that when the NFL evaluated these guys. But Downs is a guy who's quickly emerging in that Indy pass offense to be a reliable, target for whoever's quarterbacking. And I think he's a guy who could have 80, 90 catch upside as one of the focal points of a pass offense out of the slot. And then Sam Laporta, I mentioned it last week, so maybe Jeff can kind of give his stance. Another 2 touchdowns this past week. I don't know how high. I don't know how high is too high when you're talking about a guy like Laporta right now in just dynasty tight end ranks, because you can really poke holes in just about everybody above him. So if somebody wants to make an argument to have him at third, I could buy it. If someone wants to have him at fourth or fifth, okay. But like if you don't have him in that like 5, 6, 7 range, I think you're being too slow to move him up your ranks because of the job he's done and the age and stuff and the issues that some of the other ones at near the top have that help make them a little inconsistent and hold them back at times as well. So Jeff, I'll kind of open the floor there for you. I've talked a lot about A-Chain, so
I don't think there's any more to be said, man. He's got juice. Again, I think you've said it again. If he's a 10 to 12 touch guy, sometimes that's all it takes, and you could bust a 75-yard run for my opponent against me this week. But that's okay. It's really fun to see A-Chain. I'm hearing people talk about top 5, top 6, dynasty running back. I think people are pretty rookie crazy for that, but he's proven to. I think it's still. I would still want Jahmyr Gibbs long run, but I think he's proven himself to be in that tier and in that conversation. When it comes to fantasy, and I don't. Obviously, you're going to be playing A-Chain right now this year over Gibbs, but I do want to take a little bit of time to just highlight. Tyjae Spears, I think a favorite from. We had Matt Waldman on, and that was kind of one of his glowing reviews. Tyjae Spears, Jaleel McLaughlin, they're the drumbeat of the offseason, right? We heard the teams love these players. Tyjae Spears he doesn't have an ACL. He doesn't need an ACL. I think you're going to see him run out this rookie contract and provide meaningful value. I think we'll talk about it. We'll talk about him a little bit later too, because I think in the Dynasty Report, we're gonna contrast, him and Derrick Henry. But that I think that leads me to really just give glowing reviews for Jaleel McLaughlin. Right, he's found his way onto all of my Dynasty rosters, and that's because Sean Payton just could not stop talking about this guy every practice, every day of every offseason, even when he's sitting third string behind Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine in snaps. He's still talking about Jaleel McLaughlin and trying to get him play. And this was the window of opportunity. Jaleel McLaughlin outproduced, outtouched Samaje Perine, might have outsnapped him. I don't think we have the snap numbers yet. But he looked good too, right? He looked really good doing it. He got a touchdown through the air. He got 90 yards. He got on 12 touches. He looks electric. I think there's not going to be one singular running back within Denver that just, has all of the opportunity. They're going to play that. We've seen Sean Payton do that in New Orleans, right? Where, he has a mixture of complementary skill sets. And I think what you're going to see is Jaleel McLaughlin work his way in as the complementary back and probably be really productive, because that's the track record Sean Payton has when it comes to a running game is he gets the most out of his running backs. They score a lot of points in as a position, and you're going to divide that up a little bit. But McLaughlin is going to be, I think he's going to be making, Samaje Perine pretty obsolete pretty quickly.
Yeah, listen, I in one league I was in a spot with some tough buys in McLaughlin and Dynasty League.
Yeah, I had him running this week too. Same thing. Week 5 buys were rough.
Yeah, and listen, I was aggressive because I'd gotten off to a slow start, but in the dynasty setting, I felt it was warranted to be aggressive, and I had put in a bid for like $43 out of my 100, and I got him, and he's one of the reasons why I think I'm going to get the W this week. But it's not even just about that; it's more I was willing to be that aggressive, not just for a 1 week fill in, but because of what you were just saying, that I think there's some staying power here. And I'm not saying he's going to make Javonte Williams irrelevant, who, is already back from his injury, I think earlier than maybe we expected. And he might round into form later this year, or even might take him all the way to next year. But I think we see there's enough two backfield, teams now in the league. That's the norm almost, that I think a guy like McLaughlin could be one of those guys that, yeah, you get him 10 to 12 touches, but he could be viable in that in fantasy because of the high octane that he brings and the pass catching ability he brings and the open field ability that he brings. So I think McLaughlin's got some staying power that, he's a guy that I'm intrigued with. Before we go over to the dynasty
one
side of
Laporta
it,
question for you. Yeah. So I honestly, I think you can rank probably as high as you want, right? If you want to rank him 1, I don't think I can make a compelling argument. You could make that compelling argument to me. And I'd say, you've got good points there, right? I mean, he's a rookie. His age relative to a Mark Andrews, especially a Travis Kelce, I mean, his production is just insane right now. He's a rookie. Um, you know, I think immediately, so there's Kelsey, there's Andrews, those are some conversations. I think Hawkinson kind of fits in the same mold generally. I think we're probably a little bit more certain about Detroit as a franchise, in the next few years than we are, Minnesota, and not knowing what they're going to do with Kirk Cousins, whatnot. So, if you want to do Laporta over Hawkinson, I'm okay with that. If you want to do Laporta over Kyle Pitts, I know we saw Kyle Pitts have, a pretty good game this last week, but, talk about someone who's had all the promise and not delivered yet. Right? Lots of conversation to go around that in context to talk about, but, Laporta doesn't have that excuse is to be made for him or conversation. He's just right there doing it right now, already hit the promise. If you wanted him 1, that's fine. If you wanted him 3, no problem with it. If you still use kind of George Kittle, Mr. 3 touchdown game this week, he's still, I think, one of the most talented tight ends in the league, but you're not going to get the usage. Dallas Goedert had a great game that, this week as well. I think he's got some arguments if you want to take Dallas Goedert in there. Tight ends just, that was actually going to be one of our other conversations on the Dynasty Report too. So we were going to talk about the tight end landscape and what that looked like. And I think this is kind of that natural conversation. Why don't we just take this to the NFL Dynasty Report, but real quick, who would you rather have, Laporta or Pitts?
Yeah, listen, I still have Pitts. I re-ranked and updated like a week or two ago, and I moved up him. I even moved up Kincaid. I still had Laporta behind like the Pitts, Kittle, Goddard, but my argument is starting to my reasoning is starting to not be as strong and not be as sound because he's doing this as a rookie. And yes, I know there's been circumstances, right? Jameson Williams is back in the fold, and they got to integrate him back. And they haven't really done a lot with Jahmyr Gibbs just yet. And in this past week, Amon-Ra was out. I think I was a little bit hesitant to go until I saw them more at full strength and then see what his role and usage was before I start saying, oh, his usage is so much better than George Kittle and stuff like that. And then the Kyle Pitts argument is naturally talented wise, we've seen Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards his rookie year. That's nothing to joke around about for a tight end. And then it's just been really horrid quarterback play and usage for Kyle Pitts, and some of it might be on him. And we don't really know there. I think it's
Kyle Pitts has Jonnu Smith. He's kind of splitting those targets. I mean, hey, if Kyle, they both got 9 targets this past weekend, I think. Hey, if Kyle Pitts was getting 18 targets, he'd be the number 1 tight end, hands down. A tight end, again, we've said it again, it's such a hard position to really nail because this scheme just is so important for how relevant they are on a fantasy field, right? Again, George Kittle is probably one of the best tight ends in the league. You see him pop up with a 3 touchdown game this week, and he's here to show you why, let alone his blocking highlights. But that's part of it too, right? The scheme is it's not this game's a Kittle game. This game's not a Kittle game. And some coaches just do that, for their offenses entirely. And I think you waste the potential of guys like a David Njoku or a Kyle Pitts, because I think Pitts could evolve to a new team and just be used as a Jimmy Graham like weapon, right? Like you get him in the right hands and he's going to be dynamite, but you also you also have this path that, David Njoku, OJ Howard have had. And you really don't know. And like Kyle Pitts just he he's not looking right yet. I was looking at like people's kind of throwing out some of his every snap highlights and some of his routes run, and he's not looking right now. And I think that's playing a part of it too.
Yeah, I think if I had to put right here on the spot, I think I could I think I'd move Laporta to fifth ahead of Goddard and Kittle, even though I think right now they're better players for their NFL teams for sure. But I think there's volume concerns with both of them just because of how high octane their offenses are, and they're not usually being the first or second read. So then when you take into that account and then you take the age into account, I think he belongs ahead of potentially Kittle and Goddard from that retrospect. I don't think I'm ready yet to go over Pitts. So I think I'd keep Kyle Pitts at 4. I think I could move Laporta to 5 and kind of say I still want to give a little bit longer to Kyle Pitts because it wasn't that long ago that he was number 1 on everybody's tight end list. So like even being down at 4 now is a pretty substantial drop for Kyle Pitts, who not that long ago most people looked at as their easy consensus, tight end 1 in Dynasty because of Kelsey's age and stuff like that. So that's where I kind of stand right now. And like you said, this was the perfect transition to the NFL Dynasty Report for this week because we did want to look at the landscape at a tight end position. I think the other 4 major storylines, and then you can kind of go whatever you want. Jonathan Taylor's back, and not only is he back, they signed him to a contract extension, so he's locked in there. I think with the Colts for at least 2 or 3 more years. With Anthony Richardson there, so that's going to be a fun backfield. When Jonathan Taylor gets up to speed and Anthony Richardson's healthy and doing what he does. Miles Sanders is losing a lot of work to Chuba Hubbard. They just gave Miles Sanders a pretty decent running back contract in free agency. So I think that's a little surprising so early in the year. So there's some dynasty ramifications there. We mentioned Tajay Spears before. With his rising up, that's only natural then that Derrick Henry's, dynasty value is heading the other way. Is there a trade on the horizon? If Tennessee, Tennessee always outplays expectations. So I'm not sure they're going to move Derrick Henry, but is this his last year in Tennessee? So I think that's a storyline. And then Cooper Kupp's back, and he went right back into being Cooper Kupp, but Puka Nacua still had a very good game as well. And I think what today showed is there's enough for both of them to be really, really good to great fantasy assets. But it was fun to see Cooper Kupp back and doing what he always does as well. So Jeff, wherever you'd like to take it.
I formally issue a peace treaty now between the Cooper Kupp faction and the Puka Nacua faction. We are all friends now. Football is life, right? He looks like that character from Ted Lasso there, the soccer guy, just happy and let's all be happy and just enjoy a pretty dynamic Rams offense with these 2 wide receivers. We've seen there be enough room before, and I think we're just going to have 2 really good wide receivers here. I hope you bought Puka because with this game with Cooper Kupp back, he's unreachable at this point. You can't trade for him. A commentary on Jonathan Taylor, the contract extension was shocking. It didn't surprise me with the attitude that Jonathan Taylor came in off the pup and talking with his coach and, saying it's all about Indy and wanting to play. And it was just a shocking 180 from him. And I think there was just a lot of work in the background over this last month between his camp, between, the Colts, breaking down Jim Irsay. And, it's not, he got paid like an average wide receiver, right? This isn't some phenomenal, it was 3 years, 42 million, I think. That's what, 14 a year? Most average wide receivers are getting 15 at this point in time. And Jonathan Taylor's getting paid like one of the best running backs in the league at this point. But hopefully, it gives them more than the tag. It gives them some long-term security. And hopefully this is a structure that teams can kind of use when it gets to running backs who are really in their peak. Running backs are in their peak at the end of their rookie deal, right? And the thing is, you don't want to overpay a long-term deal to someone at their peak who's not going to look good at the end of that contract. I think that's why, you don't see Saquon getting 4-year deals. You didn't see J.K. Dobbins getting long-term security. A few players kind of break the mold. CMC, Nick Chubb. Is Jonathan Taylor breaking the mold, or is he kind of paving the path forward actually for players like Saquon next year? That'll be something to be seen. But I'm really happy for him. I'm happy to see him on a field. I'm happy to see him playing. Like, the NFL is better when we have Jonathan Taylor playing running back and it's even better that he gets to do it for the Indianapolis Colts with an extension. Let's touch on the other running backs though, because I think there is, really concerning trends here. So first of all, Derrick Henry, I think we've seen this trend earlier in the year. I think it's made us a little bit worried. Tennessee gets in a good enough game script and they feed Derrick Henry and he has a great game and he blows back up on your roster. But I think you have to be really careful because, he still doubled up Tyjae Spears' touches, I think, maybe a little bit less with the receiving work, but it's, it's going to be feast or famine. Derrick Henry's going to play Houston twice in your fantasy playoffs. So like he could still deliver titles and one last hurrah if he's still with Tennessee. But you said they always find a way. They're always better than expected. But that's not been the case this year. I think Vrabel's a great coach. They're struggling. They're struggling. They're not hitting. They're not winning those games that like Mike Tomlin won this past weekend against the Ravens. Right, these good coaches pulling out these games. It's the same kind of thing with Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. We saw Miles Sanders have all of the touches week 1, and just slowly Chuba Hubbard's come in and just eating into that role, and had this last week has out touched him. Chuba is one of those ones that it might not be apparent yet, but that's somebody you should probably go get on the back of your roster just in case he does end up displacing Miles Sanders and taking on the majority of the work in Carolina, because it's hard to get starting running backs, and if you can get them for cheap before they get there, that's going to help your dynasty rosters in the long term.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just surprising, like a guy who a team invested pretty highly for running back standards in Miles Sanders. So they must really be seeing either one of two things. Like they must really be seeing like what they're seeing from Chuba Hubbard, or they're really not liking what they're seeing from Miles Sanders, whether it's on the practice field, in the games, or some type of combination of both, for this to happen as quickly as it's not like this is the first week, right? We're talking about there's been signs of it skewing towards this way, like it was this past week. And we've also seen signs the whole year that Tennessee was going to get Tyjae Spears involved. This wasn't going to be like the other years when they drafted somebody like Hassan Haskins or, I think it was Darrington Evans, right? They took him at the end of the 3rd round, I think 1 year or early 4th round, and they wanted some type of compliment to Derrick Henry. They obviously right away envisioned a significant role for Tyjae Spears, and now the Titans sit 2-3. If they end up at 2-4, 2-5, do they start to think, listen, could we get back a 3rd round pick for Derrick Henry? A team maybe needs a running back, maybe Baltimore, or pick a team out there who's on a playoff trajectory, and would love to have Derrick Henry for the stretch run and doesn't care about a 3rd round pick or whatever. Because if so, now's the time to get Tyjae Spears on your roster too. Because right now, Tyjae Spears has value for sure, but no one is. If you be proactive and say, you know what, I'm going to get him now, and I'm going to even overpay a little bit, but I think the time's coming, whether it's during this trade deadline or the offseason. I think by next year, it's Tyjae Spears as the focal point of that ground game, and then if the injury issues hold up for a period of time, you're probably talking about somebody who could produce RB1 to high RB2 numbers, low RB1 to high to mid RB2 numbers. Like, I kind of, in a different way, because the age thing is differently, but just like I wanted to be proactive getting Tony Pollard, who's off to a little shaky start, but the Dallas run game has just been very inconsistent, and Dallas has played a lot of weird games. They either blow people out or get blown out. But I think, like was saying for years, get Tony Pollard on your team. I think now's the time to try to get Tyjae Spears on your team, because I think the time is coming sooner rather than later that he could be a very high impactful. And even in the meantime, he could still be a relevant fantasy piece right now, because they are finding a way to try to get him in that 9 to 11 touch range most weeks, even if Derrick Henry is still getting plenty of work as well. So I'd be buying Tyjae Spears. If you need running back help right in the media, I think a guy like Chuba Hubbard is a little bit more interesting. But long term, I would definitely be looking at a guy like Tyjae Spears way more than Chuba Hubbard. And we talked about, the Cooper Kupp Puka thing. I'm right there with Jeff. Like, there should be no more doubt. They can both survive. We saw Cooper Kupp with Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp was a wide receiver 1. Robert Woods was a wide receiver 2. There's room to go there in that offense with that coach, with that play scheme. There's more than enough for both of them to be very successful. And we saw that right out of the gate here.
Yeah, and just real quick, I want to give credit to, the Chuba Hubbard situation. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of his tape coming out of college. I thought it was very boom bust. I didn't think he had a lot of fundamentals down. And, he's learned to play the running back position at a much higher level, maybe even better than Miles Sanders, who's always kind of thrived off his athleticism and kind of, missed holes and missed pieces. Miles Sanders got better too. I think Chuba Hubbard has gotten a lot better than when we really first saw him as a prospect and as a rookie. We just haven't had the opportunity, because he had Christian McCaffrey, up until halfway through last year. And I think he played a little bit of a role last year. And I think he's just kind of showing that, I want to give a credit to Chuba that he's really showing some development in his game, as the reason that he's taking over right now. I'd love to get Tyjae Spears over Chuba Hubbard too, but Tyjae Spears was a rookie. People drafted him and they're seeing him do good. It's going to be really hard to pry him away. You're going to have to double up what they paid for him. If they bought him for a second, you might have to give up a first or 2 seconds or plus to get him. I think with Chuba Hubbard, he's a throw-in on a deal, right? Like I made a deal for Jonathan Taylor actually right before he came back. And, I asked for Chuba as a throw-in because I need depth in this league bad. It's a 14-team league. We start like 11 players. You just need bodies to throw into the lineup some weeks, like Jaleel McLaughlin. And Chuba Hubbard is one of those players like Jaleel McLaughlin that I'm throwing on the back of these rosters because I'm going to be throwing them into my lineup at times. And all he was a throw-in. He's not even worth a third, I think. And I think if you threw a 3rd round pick off to get Chuba Hubbard, he's going to be able to fill the depth in that you need to make a long-term run.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I agree with Jeff there that Hubbard is a guy that you get right now. You get him for a plug and play to help you in the immediate. But even what Jeff said there, we talked earlier about the running back landscape of the 2024 NFL draft being a little shaky. Listen, I don't want to send the pick somewhere in the first round that could be, Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams or even Brock Bowers. But if you're telling me you're a good team and you're pretty much sold that you're going to be in the last, the back third of the round 1, somewhere in that 9 to 12 range, and you feel really confident about that, I might be willing to give up a 1 to go get Tyjae Spears if you're a little light at the running back position, or you have an older guy that you think, okay, by next year I'm really going to need to start replenishing there, and you were thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get a round 1 running back probably maybe in my, in the draft, and I'm okay with that because I think if Tyjae Spears is the lead runner in Tennessee next year, I think he might be more valuable than any rookie running back that gets drafted this year. Just based on, I don't know if there's any true difference makers. I don't know if anybody's going to go, like I said, go in the top 50. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a unique rookie draft season for running backs. Guys are going to end up places and get pushed into round 1 for sure. I just don't think they're going to be guys that are in the top 4 or 5. I think even in rookie drafts, I think it's going to be dominated by the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, and Brock Bowers, and maybe there's a running back or two gets put in the perfect landing spot to go in the first half of rookie drafts. But if you tell me you thinking you're pretty sold that it's going to be a late round 1 rookie pick, I might be willing to give that up to get Tyjae Spears now before the inevitability that Derrick Henry moves on and have that. So that's one of those interesting things where you kind of got to know your team, got to know the league well, if you're willing to make that move for sure. So there it is, guys. Another Dynasty Fantasy Report for the NFL season for Week 5, NFL Rookie Report for Week 5, and then obviously the NFL Draft Report and Devy Slant for Week 6 of the college football season, including our S2S Teams of the Week. If you're enjoying this content, please get over to the website, S2S Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out our premium content tab, and for $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. You get the scouting notebook and the rankings notebook immediately, and then draft projections notebook in April. Check out the website for full details on all of that. It is the best way to support the show and to help us continue to do what we do here. So please, if you've bought it in the past, we hope that you consider purchasing it again. If you've been a long time listener but never checked out the notebooks, we do think you will enjoy it. Again, it's $9.99 for access to all 3 of those notebooks. Jeff, any final parting shots here before we wrap it up?
Nah, just really good to get back on the mic after, just taking in too much fun football, last few weekends. Best of luck to everybody out there with their fantasy teams, if they're listening for fantasy, and just keep those eyes open because the draft landscape is really shaking up a lot.
Absolutely. So on behalf of Jeff, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.